Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you, many kings and prophets have desired to see what you see, and have not seen it. To hear what you hear, and have not heard it. I thank you, Father, for hiding these things from the learned and the wise, and revealing them to the innocent and the simple.
There's a rough few days ahead for anyone traveling for the holidays. In the Northwest, violent storms have sent trees into houses and onto cars. Heavy snow has been falling in the mountains. Severe thunderstorms and tornadoes are forecast from the deep south to the Ohio Valley as the east heats up to spring-like weather for Christmas.
Harsh weather in the west has left communities buried in snow, soaked by heavy rain, and battered by powerful wind. Portland, Oregon today, crews were cleaning up trees blown over in the storm.
I heard a loud boom, but didn't really know what it was. And then the whole house, it was like it was on a little trampoline, like it almost bounced. A cookie, everything went flying.
The power was still out today for thousands in the Portland area. A line came down near Heather Kermis.
The power lines were turning green, blue, orange, and everything was shaking. It was pretty crazy.
At Snoqualmie in the mountains outside Seattle, deep and heavy snow stopped traffic. The search for a missing backcountry skier resumed today after being called off yesterday because of weather. Alan Lebissiner of King County Search and Rescue.
You see the conditions, it's bad. Avalanche danger is really extreme.
The same storm buried the town of Camas, 40 miles from Salt Lake City, under a foot of fresh snow. In California, on the road to Lake Tahoe, mountain traffic came to a near standstill as plows worked to clear the snow. On these roads, trucker Bill Brown is in no hurry.
And my only concern is a guy in a four-wheeler who's doing 50 miles an hour in hydroplanes in the rain, and I have to dodge him.
In Southern California's Mojave Desert, more than 15 tractor trailers were blown over by winds gusting 60 to 80 miles an hour. In the mountains east of Los Angeles, enough snow fell to open the slopes for night skiing. Another cold storm from up in the Gulf of Alaska is coming toward the west coast. It could bring snow on Christmas Eve to Seattle and Portland, two places that don't usually get a white Christmas. And Nora, we could even get snow on some of the high hills here in the San Francisco area.
We saw tragic evidence today of the growing insurgency in Afghanistan. 6 American service members were killed in the worst attack on U.S. forces there in 2015. They were ambushed by a suicide bomber not far from their base in the north. 3 Americans and 3 Afghans were wounded.
The American service members were stopped at a local meeting point while on patrol with Afghan forces when a suicide bomber drove a motorcycle packed with explosives into the group. The Taliban took credit for the attack, which happened nearby Bagram Airfield, the largest remaining U.S. military base in Afghanistan. The Pentagon has warned that the insurgents have been gaining strength since the end of the U.S. combat mission. The Taliban has seized control of the strategic Helmand province in the south, as well as getting closer to important cities. National security analyst Michael O'Hanlon just returned from Afghanistan.
The threat remains roughly constant. The insurgency is resilient, and we have 100,000 fewer combined forces on patrol across the country.
So far this year, 20 American service members have been killed. There have also been 2 American civilian casualties, including 35-year-old aid worker Lisa Akbari. The former U.S. Army researcher was shot in the back of the head while leaving her gym in Kabul on Sunday. Her family told us she had moved there 3 years ago to help Afghan women and children.
The Taliban has claimed responsibility for the suicide attack that killed 6 American soldiers in Afghanistan yesterday, making it the deadliest attack on U.S. troops since 2012. The attack comes as the Taliban continues to advance in Afghanistan. The terrorist group took over a strategic district in the Helmand province over the weekend. During a visit to troops in Afghanistan last week, Secretary of Defense Ash Carter admitted things are not going well.
The Taliban's advances in some parts of the country, even if only temporary, underscore that this is a tough fight, and it's far from over.
Tonight, U.S. military officials are under intensifying pressure to target ISIS militants and officials inside Raqqa, the stronghold in that city in Syria. U.S. military official tells us tonight that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, not him, but this man, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, is under more pressure, but he's also able to move in and out of the city fairly freely under airtight security. The question of whether to target leaders like him and avoid civilian casualties is weighing heavily inside the White House and on the minds of those who want to be the next commander-in-chief. And we have to warn viewers, some images in this story some might find disturbing. The city burst into our consciousness with these horrific images. Enemies of ISIS killed in battle, their severed heads displayed on poles in the city center. Crucifixions of non-believers out in the open for passing residents to see. Western journalists can't get into Raqqa, but residents and human rights groups say atrocities are part of life in this ISIS stronghold. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights tells CNN City Hall in Raqqa houses ISIS administrators, police, and fighters. The New York Times reports the top floors of City Hall are a dorm for fighters. Tonight, a top challenge for U.S. military officials under extreme pressure to intensify their campaign against ISIS in the wake of Paris and San Bernardino, how to target key ISIS leaders and fighters who mix in with the civilian population in Raqqa.
They've used them as civilians as human shields. Second, they quarter troops in buildings where there are other civilians as well. They also store weapons in civilian buildings as well.
It's a challenge that's been a point of contention in the presidential campaign.
Saudi Arabia's relentless airstrikes on Yemen are causing more death and destruction across the country. The death toll from the bombardment of Mukha in Taiz province has risen to 8. 4 people have also been injured. Saudi fighter jets also launched a series of raids on Hama port in Hodeidah province. In retaliation, the Yemeni army and popular committees have targeted Qaza'a camp.
Police in Bosnia have detained 11 people suspected of having links with the Islamic State militants fighting in Syria and also in Iraq. Police say the operation was continuing in 13 locations in the wider area of Sarajevo. The prosecutor's office said the operation is targeting 15 suspects who've been investigated for incitement and recruitment for terrorist attacks. Police say they seized evidence of links with Islamic State militants during a search of locations used by suspects, including 2 places of worship and several private homes.
Russia says its warplanes have carried out 302 sorties in Syria between December the 18th and 23rd, hitting nearly 1,100 Daesh targets. The Russian Defense Ministry says the destroyed targets include a training camp where there were recruits from Turkey and countries of the Commonwealth of Independent States. Moscow has also rejected a report by Amnesty International which says its bombing of Syria may amount to war crimes because of the number of civilians killed in the attacks. A spokesman for the Russian Defense Ministry says Amnesty's report is, quote, biased and contains unfounded claims. Igor Konashenkov also rejected accusations that Russia is using cluster bombs in Syria.
A devastating start to Christmas weekend. At least 8 people are dead after violent storms ripped through the South and Midwest. Nearly 50 million Americans could face more severe storms today. Tornadoes yesterday ripped through at least 5 states.
At least 20 twisters have been reported. The storms left at least 40 people hurt. 2 others are still unaccounted for. Weather Channel meteorologist Mike Seidel is in Holly Springs, Mississippi, where a tornado killed a 7-year-old boy.
There's a tornado in front of us.
Those are the panicked pleas for help from a woman in Mississippi.
Trying to figure out which way we need to move. We pulled over.
That thing is big. She and her husband survived a day of deadly spring-like storms in the South. See debris rumbling through the northern part of the state. This massive tornado damaged dozens of homes just outside the town of Clarksdale.
Tornado!
In Holly Springs, a 7-year-old boy was killed when the car he was riding in was tossed into the air. Roads across the Midwest and South were a nightmare. You can see debris flying into the air as one tornado tears through traffic near the Tennessee border, flipping this truck on its side. This driver captured it on her cell phone. In Arkansas, the severe weather knocked out power for more than 3,500 people. And an 18-year-old woman was killed when a tree fell into this home. Rescuers pulled a 1-year-old baby who was with her to safety.
The wind was moving, and it moved through very quick.
The storms pounded drivers in Missouri with hail, fueled lightning strikes in Indiana and Tennessee, and left significant damage in at least a half a dozen states.
I'm just thankful that our lives are saved.
The roof came off, and I had my dog. I was holding my dog. I'm lucky to be alive. I get to see my kids.
Even in the midst of the destruction, survivors were reminded that possessions can be replaced.
I could just hear my windows breaking out of my car. I was blessed. You know, you can buy the things, the toys, you can buy those over, but I can't replace my kids.
2 people are still unaccounted for nearby Benton County, Mississippi. The governor of Mississippi yesterday issued a statement asking for prayers for those impacted by these storms. Benita?
Mike Seidel, thank you.
Meanwhile, the death toll continues to climb in tornado-ravaged Mississippi. 7 people died in that state, and at least 1 person remains unaccounted for at this hour in Benton County. Now, this tornado was one of many that touched down in northern Mississippi yesterday, where more than 100 homes were destroyed as a result.
In China, over 100 million people have been warned to stay indoors as dangerous smog levels persist in major cities, including the capital, Beijing, and the sprawling industrial hub of Tianjin. Air pollution warnings have been issued for roughly 50 cities, including 10 which are on red alert for hazardous smog. Now, the alert has limited vehicles on the road while banning fireworks and outdoor barbecues. Harmful microscopic particles known as the PM2.5 that penetrate deep into the lungs were recorded at their highest at 727 micrograms per cubic meter in Xinjiang. According to the Chinese media, the country's air quality for November and December was at a 3-year low. The problem has forced authorities to order the closure of several factories.
Clashes have intensified between Turkish security forces and Kurdish militants in the southeastern city of Diyarbakir. According to Turkish security sources, the conflict began following a bomb attack on troops in the district of Sur. 1 soldier was killed and 7 others, including a civilian, were wounded in the incident. Turkish security forces say the attack was carried out by militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. Over the past few months, Diyarbakir has been the scene of clashes between PKK militants and the Turkish army. The violence has left hundreds dead on both sides. The Turkish government has pledged to press ahead with operations until the region is purged of militants.
Iraqi forces moving through areas of eastern Ramadi where they have pushed back ISIS militants. What's left is a city in rubble, the remains of a tough fight for U.S.-trained Iraqi units, with more to come. Watching it all unfold in real time, U.S. commanders from their operations center.
This enemy has set up defensive belts. So they used IEDs, the very same IEDs that we faced here in Iraq years ago, but now they use them in clusters as if they were minefields. They will rig entire houses to explode.
U.S. warplanes are launching dozens of airstrikes to back up Iraqi ground forces, picking out ISIS fighting positions from the air and not inadvertently killing civilians remains a huge challenge. Administration officials are talking about how to possibly loosen up the rules restricting airstrikes so they can turn up the pressure on ISIS.
What's being talked about out there is how much tolerance we should have for civilian casualties. And that's part of our American values, right? We say that we bring our values to war.
U.S. military officials say indiscriminate bombing is not productive, and large groups of ISIS soldiers without civilians nearby rarely happens.
ISIS are living in towns and cities amidst in the same blocks as the citizens. So when you're talking about expanding the rules of engagement, I don't see how you do that without raising the risk that women and children will die.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs warns the rules will stretch for a big target.